Hi everyone. I hope you are having a good day. My name is Anubhav and I am super glad and excited to welcome you to my YouTube channel. This is the first video on my channel and I am very pumped up to present you all the specific lecture. So this video is going to be about Docker and networking in Docker in specific. So we'll be doing a lot of stuff, a lot of hands-on this specific lecture. What I already assume is that you guys are already comfortable with the basics of Docker. You know what a Docker file is, what a Docker image is, how to bring up a Docker containers, and all those stuff, right? So you are absolutely comfortable with the basics of Docker. Uh, in this video and maybe in next few videos, we'll be looking at some of the more advanced concept of Dockers like Docker networking, volume mounts, and all those stuff, right? Without further ado, I would present you all what we'll be doing in this specific lecture. And again, as I said, it's going to be more of a hands-on exercise than anything else. So I hope you all are comfortable with this. So yeah, without much of ado, let's get started. There are two prerequisites before beginning this. The first and foremost, as I told you, is like you're absolutely comfortable and familiar with the basics of Docker at least. So we are not going to cover all those components, though I will try my best to like walk you through as and when required, right? And the second is we'll be actually having two containers, right? The first container over here is a Flask container, right? Like it runs a Python image, and in that specific container we'll be using a library called Fortune Python, right? So what Fortune Python does is it gives you some random predictions or some random fortune, right? So it will just output you a fortune, like for example this year will be good for you, right? So something like this. So we'll be building a very simple get API in Flask, right? Which will call this specific library and hence get the desired output for you, correct? And the second container is what like we'll be using the image over here. We'll be using it something called Cowsay. So Cowsay is a CLI tool which prints out some ASCII images for you, right? Like this is the one that you see the attached image in the specific slide as well. So this is from Cowsay, right? So what I want to do is I want to connect these two containers, right? So I want the prediction from my container one, right, which is a Flask based container, to flow into my Cowsay container, right? The container 2, right? And it prints out that specific thing. So I want the kind of networking between these two containers. So as you all know, like the Docker containers are isolated, right? So which essentially means like because these are two separate containers, these cannot communicate with each other, right? And this is what I want to solve. I want a way to like have these containers communicate with each other, right? So I will just like give you a fun tutorial on what cow says before moving to the actual coding so that you all get comfortable and like absolutely ready to move on with the stuff, right? So it's a very simple library Cowsay, or it's a very simple package, you can say. You just need to write Cowsay and followed by what you want the cow to say, right? So as I told you, it prints up a cow image, right? Like and a text above it. So it's ASCII CLI based ASCII too. So I can just write Cowsay konnichiwa Anubhav and it will generate this image for you, right? So yeah, something like this. So it is a very fun tool to play with. It does absolutely nothing, right? Like there is no use of this specific thing, but a very fun tool to play with indeed. So yeah, that's why I'm using it, just to demonstrate you how things work. Again, like just to give you a real life example. So what I want is like this cow say to get the prediction, right? So I want the prediction to come from my container, from my Flask container or my Python based container, right, which is running with Fortune Python. So I want something like when I'm inside the Cowsay container, I get I get the fortune from my container one and it prints me this, right? So what I will need to do is I will need to expose an API which will be able to do that stuff and then do a Cowsay curl get followed by that specific API to get that fortune, right? And let's say the fortune returns like this year will be good for you, this year will be good for you. Like just let's just see, like this is the fortune that got written. So this will be our output, right? Like our output will be in this specific form. So yeah, this is what I want to do. And obviously, as I told you, like the container one is a Flask app, which essentially means I'll be coding this stuff in Python. I'll be exposing a simple get API, right? Then I'll be creating a Docker file for that, then a Docker image for that, and then a Docker container out of it, right? So in this specific video, right, in this specific video, like, we have three goals, right? I will just list the goals for you. The first is to create that simple API, which is a get API to get that fortune, right? Then creating a Docker image, a Docker file for the specific Flask app, right? Then creating the Docker image out of it, and then essentially creating the Docker container. So this is what we'll be doing in this specific video, right? In the next video, we'll be creating the second container, which is the Cowsay container, and then see how we would be able to connect all this stuff, right? So yeah, I mean, it should be a 2 or 3 CDs video. I don't want to make it very large, one video to be let's say an hour or so, because otherwise it gets very difficult to focus on things. So I hope you get my point. Without ado, let's get to the coding section, right? So I will just open up my code editor. So this is this is PyCharm, right? So PyCharm is a editor by or IDE by JetBrains. It's a very good editor for, or IDE for your Python projects, right? So I'm like, I use this, and this is not sponsored by PyCharm, by the way. You are absolutely like free and welcome to use VS Code as well if that suits you, but I'll be using PyCharm for the specific series, because like and my reason is like I also work on Java. So like for Java they have a IDE called IntelliJ, right? So I mean, just that the environment is more comfortable for me to use, because I don't have to think about, okay, with this controllers and all that stuff. So yeah, that's my only reason. So let's get started, right? So as I told you, we'll be using a library called Fortune Python, right? And then I will open this library up for you in PyP. So if I go to PyP, right, this is the library that I'm talking about, which is called Fortune Python. Can be installed with this simple command called pip install Fortune Python, and using it is very simple. It's just 2 lines that we have to use. So our API is essentially going to be a very simple API, right? So yeah, going back to my IDE, there's another way to install this specific set of libraries, right? And yeah, disclaimer, as of now, like, I mean, at this point in time, right, I'm just trying to build the Flask API, right, and locally and not on Docker. Obviously we are using Docker in the later section of this video, but right now my goal is to just make that API locally, and then I will be converting into a Docker file, Docker image, and all that stuff, right? So as of now, as of now in this video, right, like at this specific point stamp, I am creating a like a localized Flask app, right? And then essentially in this video I'll be converting into a Docker image, and then essentially a Docker container. Correct? So yeah, so the library, another way of installing the library is to go to settings, go to your project, right? Like you will see a project name over here. Go to Python interpreter, right? Click on this plus sign and write the name of your library, right? So the name of my library is called fortune-python. So it should be reflected over here. You can always click on install package, right? For me it's already installed, so I'm obviously not going to do it. Other way is to obviously use pip install Fortune Python, and if I do it, for me it would be requirement already satisfied. So I mean, no, essentially no users of this, but yeah, you should be able to install like this, right? And yeah, if you get some errors regarding strict mode, you can always make it off or use a virtual environment. I mean, I just want to keep it simple, so not doing that stuff as of so let's get to coding. The first task is to create that simple API. It's a Flask app, so we'll need to import Flask. We'll need to create that API, right? And obviously we'll also need to import the Fortune module. So first let's just import the Flask app. So from Flask, import Flask, and from Fortune, import Fortune. Correct. So this is what I want to do, and this is going to be a Flask app. So app is equals to Flask underscore name, right? And I'm sorry if like the GitHub Copilot is like disturbing you on the screen. Maybe I will switch it off from the next video. I just use it just to get some good suggestions out of it. I would also suggest you use it because it will make your life a bit easier and simpler, because you won't forget stuff, right? It will just auto suggest you all those things. So yeah, I've just created a object of Flask, and I have named it as app, right? So my next goal is to create the route or to create the API. So what I will do is I will create the API and I will write the API name as my fortune, right? And the method is obviously going to be a get method, right? So methods is equals to get, correct? The name of the function will be def my fortune, right? And what I'll be doing is return fortune, correct? So just a just a very basic API, right? This API is with a route called my fortune, and the method is the get method, right? And as soon as I hit the specific API, right, it will return me a random fortune, and this fortune is getting inputted from here. So yeah, that's my API, and now I will need to run this. So I will need to write if dash dash sorry underscore underscore and not dash dash name equals main. Let's just run the app, right? So yeah, app dot run. I'll need to specify the port. The port is going to be 3009 for me, right? And this is what my app would look like, right? That was a different thing that got exposed, right? A different library got exposed. I did not want that. So yeah, this is what my Flask app looks like. It's a very simple 10 lines, 12 lines Flask app, right? Just creating the app object, creating the API, and then running this, right? And as I told you, as of now at this current timestamp, I want to run it locally, and then essentially I would create a Docker image and continue all out of that, right? So yeah, let's just test it if this is working fine or not. I can just write python 3 app.py. This should start up my Flask server, and you can see it has started up my Flask server. I will go to Postman and hit the specific API and see if things are working fine or not. So yeah, so this is my API, which is localhost 3009 slash my fortune. And if I hit a send button on this, you would see that I'm getting some result out of it, right? So again, click on send, you would see like another fortune coming up. Click on send again, another fortune coming up. So yeah, it's giving you a result, which essentially means that my Flask app is up and running, so no issues over here, right? I will just close this app, right? Because now I want to create a Docker image and a container out of it, right? So the first thing to create a Docker container from it would be to create a Docker file, which would essentially help create a Docker image, and via that Docker image we can run the Docker container, correct? So yeah, let's just go and create a Docker file. So I will go to my base directory, new file, and the name of the file would be Docker file, because this is what Docker tells us to use as the name of the Docker file, right? And so creating a Docker file in Python is very simple. For a Python app is very simple, right? Just imagine the case that not imagine, it's the actual case actually, that your container is isolated, right? It's a clean state, right? It does not know anything. So you will need to install. So if let's assume that if you get a new system, right, and if you need to get this up and running, so what are the things that that you would need to install to get this specific app up and running? So this is what we define in a Docker file, right? And this is what the base of Docker is, because it's an isolated environment, right? It's actually separate from your host environment, so it does not contain any libraries, any operating system, any Python environments, and all that stuff, right? So you would need to do that. So yeah, the first thing that I need to define in a Docker file is the Python image that I'll be using up. So I'll be using something called a Python 3.9 slim image. So from Python 3.9 dash slim, so this is my image name. So what it does is it will tell that okay, from the Docker hub I need to get this specific Python environment, right? Or this Python version, correct? So this is how it is. And then like once you have this, I will need to set up something called work directory, and work directory would be /app. So what it will do is inside that Docker container, which is an isolated environment, right, it will create up a directory called /app, and it will cd to that specific directory and do all the stuff over here, right? So far so good, all basic steps, right? The next thing is installing all the libraries, right? All the required libraries. So in Python, if you want to install any library, right? And if you have shipped something, you would obviously know that you would need to do it in forms of requirement.txt, correct? So yeah, which essentially means you would need to define your requirements.txt as well. And requirements.txt has the name of the libraries, right? So for this specific, if I go to your app.py, right, for this specific thing, we have two libraries which are running, which is Flask and Fortune. So we need to add the name of the libraries in the requirements.txt file. I hope you get my point. And this is because, again, repeating on the concept that Dockers are isolated environment. It does not know what libraries are installed and all that stuff, right? And does not have any installed libraries, not even knowing the fact. But the fact it does not have any installed libraries as of now. So you would need to do all the stuff yourself. So my next step would be to copy this requirements.txt file. And yes, this is correct that I do not have a requirement.txt file as of now in my specific local directory, but I'll be creating this soon just after writing the specific Docker file. And because I assume you all are already knowing about Docker stuff and working in Python and all those stuff, so it's not very confusing for you as of now. So yeah, copy requirements.txt to your work directory, right? And yes, once you have copied your requirement.txt file, right, the next step is to install those set of requirements, right? So for that, you need to run that command, which is Python pip. Sorry, which is like pip install dash r requirements.txt, right? Which essentially reads our txt file and install all the required libraries, right? And yes, you need to add the same command over here as well. So it should be run pip install dash r requirements. Again, a spelling mistake. Requirements.txt. I hope I have not made a spelling mistake this time. And yes, seems correct. So after I am done installing all the requirements.txt file, I want to copy all the rest of the files, right? So copy dot dot, which essentially signifies copy all the remaining files, correct? And the next step would be to expose a specific port, right? And oh, I'm sorry. Just a bit of cold over here, so sorry for the interruption. But yeah, so if you go back to your app.py file, right, you would actually notice something like we have exposed a specific port over here, right, which is port 3009. So again, iterating on that concept that Docker is an isolated environment, right? So when you spawn up a Docker container, it has to, like, and you want to access that Docker container from your host system, right? A port has to be exposed in that specific Docker container as well, right? So you would need a way for the system to know that, okay, you want to expose a specific port, right? And this is what we specify over here. So your Python app on the, or your Flask app on the Docker container exposes port 3009, right, or runs on port 3009, and hence you would want to expose the port 3009 as well on the Docker container. So we need to write a line which is called expose 3009, correct? And then the last line is like, how would you run your Python app, which is python3 app.py, right? So this is what it does. So I hope that the steps of creating a Docker file is clear to you, right? So steps are very simple. First is fetch the Python official image, right? Create the app directory, copy the requirements.txt file, install all the requirements, expose a specific port, and then run the Python command, right? This is what we are doing. A question I often get is like, why have I used port 3009 and can you use any other port? So the answer to this question is yes. You can always use a port of your choice, given that the port is not already being used somewhere. So you're free to use any port. Why have I used 3009? I mean, it's just a random port that I have used. It's actually not random. There's a reason to it, and the reason is like my partner's birthday fall on 3009. So it's just a way for me to remember that I do not forget her birthday, right? So it just helps me, like, running my application on this port just helps me reiterate on the fact that yeah, her birthday falls on 30th September, so I would need to wish her. So just that I do not forget. Otherwise, it's a good chance I might forget. I hope she's not listening to this tutorial. I know she would, but yeah. Anyway, so uh, yeah, I mean that's the reason I have used port 3009, but you're free to use any other port of your choice. So but the point being, if you use, let's say, port 5010, right, you need to expose port 5010 over here as well. So yes, this is what we need to do. And to uh, make it exposed to the outside world, we would also need to use something called host, which I will give as 0.0.0.0, right? So which will expose it to all the open host over here, right? Like we just need to do it. No, don't worry about the specific line as such. But yes, so we are all good. The only thing that is remaining is creating the requirements.txt file. So I will just create that requirements.txt file as well. Requirements.txt. So you need two libraries in the requirements.txt file. One is called Flask and other is called Fortune Python. And not only fortune, as in, so again a question which I often get is, I've imported something called fortune, right, but I'm writing fortune python. So this is the actual name of the library, right? So your how your requirements.txt file works, it reads the library name, right, and it has to match with what the official pypy name of this library is, which is fortune python, right? You can always cross check by going to pypy or pyp website and see like what the name is. So it's fortune python, and that is what I've used over here as well. So yeah, I think all good. And now we are all good to create a docker image out of it. Oh, very interesting. Now so I would create a docker image and I would use docker build command. So docker build, and essentially to create an image you can always use this command called docker build followed by a period sign, or a dot sign as you would like to say. But I would also need to give a name to this image because I want like my images to be named. So I would say fortune Cowsay v1 followed by a like a dot or period command, right? So this essentially builds up your image, right, and it tags this with a name called fortune Cowsay v1. So let's just build this image now. And as you can see, it's building up your image. It will take some 8-9 seconds to build that. You can get your cop. Okay, I think I got some errors and I need to see what that error is. It says failed to solve, did not requirements.txt did not complete. Okay. Okay. Let me go back to this file and see where have I done any mistakes. Requirements. Okay, I think should be the spelling. There's a spelling mistake, right? And what's the spelling of requirements? Is it UIRE or not? I think there should not be any RE. I mean the so I need to correct the spelling mistake actually. So yeah, so requirements and requirements, is it the spelling mistake that I'm seeing? Pip install require, yeah, I am missing an E over here, right? Yeah, so yeah, this was the mistake, and I know I make a lot of spelling mistakes, so pardon me for that. But yes, and I would want to build this image, so I just want to tag v2 this time because I know my first image was not treated, but anyways, I know because this is an iteration or that's a code change, so just increasing one specific version, right? So yeah, let's start building it now, and hopefully it should be built. And yes, uh, fortunately it got finished very soon in 1.2 seconds, so all good now. I thought meanwhile if it builds, like I can just like get a cup of coffee for myself, but that's not happening. But that's okay. So yeah, your image of the specific thing is built, right? And if you want to see if it's built or not successfully, always go to your docker dashboard, right? Go to images and see the specific thing. So yeah, fortune cow saved with the tag called v2 unused and created less than a minute ago with a size of 165.61 MB. You can see, why is this so heavy? Actually it's not a heavy image, but I mean, because you have installed python, right? Python would take up some space on your of the docker image as well, right? And that's why like it's above 100 MBs. So yeah, I mean the code wise we have not written a lot of code, it's just 10 or 12 lines of code, right? So obviously it should not be, it should be in kbs, right? But the main size is coming from your operating system and your python version that you're using, right? And that is why, to keep the size limited, I've used something called a slim version, right? Otherwise you could have used a heavier version as well, but it should not matter to you at this point in time anyways. So yeah, I will just clear the output, and now I'll be creating a container from this image, right? So creating a container is again very easy. You just need to write the command called docker run, saying that you want to run this in detached mode, followed by the port mapping, right? So port mapping is, if you remember, we have exposed port 3009 of our docker container, and there's a specific command tells, okay, with which port of the exposed docker container of the host system do you want to expose it to. So there is a port on your docker container which is open, and with which port on your local system do you want to map that specific port to, right? So this specific expose command opens up the port on your docker container itself, right? Or the isolated environment of docker itself, right? And now it's the mapping, right? So you could always specify, like, you want to map port 5010 of your local system with port 3009 of the docker container, but I will be mapping both of them at the same place. So port 3009 of my local system with port 3009 of docker, followed by the name of the container, which is dash dash name. Which is, the flag is called dash dash name, which will be fortune Cowsay container, followed by the image name, which is fortune Cowsay v2, I think, right? And this should be up and running in few seconds, if everything goes right. If not, we'll just debug and see what happens. So yeah, and as you can see, like, this specific container is up and running, and I can always see the status back in my dashboard if this container is now up and running and not, and if it's receiving the logs and all or not. So go to containers, go to the specific thing called fortune Cowsay container. You can see it's up and running, the port switch is mapped, and you can see it started just in 10 seconds ago, right? And yeah, the server is up and running. So good news for us that the Flask server is up and running, and we should be able to access it. So it's running on 127.0.0.1, followed by 3009, which indeed is your local host, followed by your port, right? So you can always copy this, go to your Chrome, right? Write this address, give the path or the API endpoint, which is my fortune, and things should actually work for you. If it works, all good. Like, this is what we wanted to achieve in this specific lecture, and yes, it does work. Excellent, right? So yeah, this is what we wanted. So we wanted to create the first container which runs a Flask app, right, and gives and predicts some random fortune, right? So the scope of this lecture is like fully satisfied now. In the next video, right, we'll be creating that Cowsay container, right? And now I want to connect that Cowsay container to this specific container so that it gets the communication, right? Like the Cowsay container should have an input channel to receive the predictions from your Flask container or your container one, right? And this is what I wanted to achieve in the next lecture. So yes, I really enjoy teaching this specific lecture, and I hope you enjoyed this lecture as well. I hope you were able to get some understanding of Docker in general. Obviously, we have not even gone to networking as of now, but Docker containers, how to a Docker image, how to write a Docker file, and all that stuff. I know I told you in the beginning that we are not going very deep into Docker, but I have tried to explain uh, as much as I could given the scope of this lecture. So yes, see you in the next one, and please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you, and have a good day.